Hello everyone. On behalf of the Victorian team at the Institute of Architects, I'd like to offer you a warm welcome to today's lean-in, thinking about gutters, pipes and taps. Water forms a huge part of everyday life, yet the act of using water is often not part of conscious thought. Whether in public or private spheres, architectural design can interrogate ways to raise awareness of the role of water. My name is Stephanie Bullock and I'm from Kozloff Architecture, and I sit on the Institute's Victorian Chapter Council, and it's my honour to be your host and moderator for today's lean-in session. We're joining from across the country today, and we acknowledge with deep respect the traditional owners of this land. We also acknowledge that it is a privilege to stand on country and walk in the footsteps of those before us, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. The lean-in session is being recorded, so if you miss anything today or have to leave early, we'll be publishing this recording on the Institute's YouTube channel in the next couple of days, and we will share that link with you in our upcoming email communications. This lean-in session enables you to ask questions of our panellists, so if you have a question or comment, please use the Q&A box down below to add yours in, and we'll go through these later in the session. Our presenter today is Marika Neustupny, who is a founding director of NMBW Architecture Studio and a postdoctoral researcher at Monash University. NMBW projects have been published widely and received numerous awards across a range of categories, including most recently the 2024 Sir Osborne McCutcheon Award for Sanders Place, Richmond. Engagement with research is fundamental to NMBW's practice. In today's lean-in, Marika will be presenting research in this area, some precedents, and also NMBW projects in relation to gutters, pipes and taps. Thanks so much, Marika.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks everyone for joining. And I'm very happy to be able to present this work as part of the Institute's lean-in session. I'm going to turn my video off now, and I'll turn it back on at the end, and I'll welcome any discussion. Love talking about this topic. So I'm just, okay, there we go. I also wish to acknowledge Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, cultural custodians of the lands in which we work and reside at NMBW, and the Woiwurrung and Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation, traditional owners of the land in which our projects are located that I'll be showing to you today. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I want to point out this beautiful eel trap image of a lovely artwork by Kim Wandin, Iuk Bagurk Gunga, as part of the NGV Triennial last year, so some people may have seen it. It's an enormous, I think it's 8 meters long, bronze statue, and it feels particularly useful for us to think about today because it indicates all those eels that are underneath the ground where we're working and walking now, and they are roaming around through all our underground waterways. It's a wonderful idea. And it links quite directly to the essential way that I'm trying to think about water, and I hope to add something for everybody to think about, which is the idea of awareness. So I'm really trying to think about sustainability in terms of human interaction with water and being conscious and aware of how we use water, as opposed to the types of mechanisms and technology that's also obviously important, but I'm just trying to raise awareness to this factor. So here is my personal kitchen window, and I want to point out how important it is the way that the kitchen window is designed. This is designed by a wonderful 60s architect from Europe who really knew how to design apartments. And we can see from the window as we're washing the dishes and doing all the cookies and things that I have spent a lot of time making, that you can look right down to the roadway on the left, I'm not sure if you can see my arrow, but right down to the roadway on the left and cars and people approaching down the pathway. You can see people who are on the balcony here. And importantly, you can see and wave to neighbours as they're walking across the bridge. And this is all related to the half flight difference between these people and the apartment that I'm in. So there's a lot of aspects to this particular view. And of course, the fact that you can see the sky and the greenery and you're very close to the birds. These are all things that are important for when you're doing the washing up. And I know that Stephanie read this out before, but I want to make a point about some of this text that was included as the introduction. So water forms a huge part of everyday life, and this is important that it's part of everyday life. We use it all the time. So if we can really think about how to use water, it can make a huge difference to the world. But it's often not part of conscious thought. And this is something that is not going to change. The majority of people are not going to be thinking about water, but architects can think about water. So whether in public or private spheres, and I want to point this out because I'm going to show you two houses today, but we at NMBW think about water in this type of way for all our projects, whether public or private. And the point is that architectural design can interrogate ways to raise awareness of the role of water. And really, that's what I want to show you today. So here is an example of how I've been thinking about water as I move around it. And I'm sure everybody does, because that's just what architects do, is that they think about things as they're moving around the city and traveling. So this is a hotel that I stayed in Japan from the 1960s. And you can see that inset into the corridor is a shared wash basin where everybody who's staying on that level brushes their teeth and washes their and brushes their hair and so on. So on the left, you can see that it's part of circulation. So that's really important, that water and circulation can be thought about together. In the middle, you can see that the glass is linking through to greenery and the outside. So it's important that this moment is happening within a courtyard space or links to a courtyard space. And on the right, you can see that the taps are very, well, they are somewhat vernacular, I suppose, in the way that they've been put there, but there's been quite a lot of careful thought and detail placed into the sort of joy of the material qualities that surround the moment of turning on the tap. So I do have half Japanese background, and I have a lot of interest in the history of Japan as well. But one thing about Japan is that it rains a lot. And here's an image, a historical image, which indicates that if you can stop to enjoy not only rain, but also the weather generally, then you might really try to experience and understand what that weather means. And I want to point out, this is a historical map of Melbourne, and it's from the era where there was a lot of sort of low-lying waterways exposed. These are all covered up now, but these waterways were really quite instrumental in setting out the way that our city has been planned. And this is something that I won't go into now, but it's actually really important for the way we can think about all our sites and projects. Here I've got a bit of a study comparing Carlton, 1896, with a block of Tokyo in the Edo period. And what I want to show here is that we may think that the way that sewage and water supply is provided in the city is absolutely standard around the world, but it's not always the case. So on the left, we can see that in Carlton, the water supply is coming from the outside and the sewerage is going through to the laneways in the back. That's basically what I'm trying to show here with this drawing. But what's interesting for me is that in Edo period Tokyo, both the supply and the waste were traveling down the center of the block. So this is the outside of the block, and this is something like the laneway, and everybody's accessing actually from this side, and everything coming in and out. So in and out from front is what I was summarizing there. This is a detail. I'll just quickly explain. I've just looked at this block and this block in the next slide. So this is a detail of how that operates inside the subdivision. In Carlton, we have 3 houses, and all the water work materials are happening in the back. So that's the kitchen, the bathroom, and the laundry are all happening at the back of the site, because really it's the sewerage, which is the expensive part of, and here of course is the water closet, which originally was night soil and then became water. And in Tokyo, this is really significant, is that the toilets were actually shared at this stage, but the kitchen work happened at the front of the tenement. And you can be shocked here about the fact that there's something like 10 tenements in the same size as probably 2 houses, which were already, of course, really crowded at that time in Carlton. So here's a tiny little tenement with a 6-mat room and a table, and the table gets put away at night and turns into the bedroom. And this is like the kitchen and the entryway, and all the water coming in and out comes along from here with a little lift up lids to the gutter. So here's a beautiful drawing sketch from Asby Brown, and I've got the reference for that in a second, but it gives you a feeling for how it actually felt in that Tokyo tenement. And this was such a great publication that I do want to share it with you. It's called Just Enough: Lessons in Living Green from Traditional Japan, from Asby Brown, a wonderful scholar in Tokyo. And this runs through lots and lots of ideas, not only the ones that I'm showing to you today. I want to also show you this, even though it's a bit technical, and to be honest, it's pretty tricky to understand it very easily. But this is an important book for me, where we're talking about the relationship between collective and individual modes of coordination. And we can, I very much welcome any questions or discussion about this, but the idea that, you know, in contemporary society, we're really declining in collective action. And I would be interested to think more about this. This diagram down the bottom tries to explain what Elizabeth Shove, the author of this diagram, talks about as the ratchet effect, where we gain in technology and we think that we can do things faster and more efficiently, but then somehow or other the world catches up and things become just as clogged up as they were before. And I was just thinking about this previously, that, you know, we can think that Revit will change our lives, but then we might discover that things aren't remaining as efficient as we'd hoped. We can talk about that later. This is Elizabeth Shove's wonderful book, Comfort, Cleanliness and Convenience, The Social Organization of Normality. This is just a very text-heavy book, but I do recommend it. It's very interesting. Now I want to show you 2 houses, and I will focus on the North Melbourne house and a little less on the Point Lonsdale house. North Melbourne house is in Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung country. And I want to start by talking about the roof. So we said that this presentation is about gutters, pipes, and taps. So gutters is clearly got a lot to do with roof form. And you can see here that this project has a slightly strange roof form compared to so-called ordinary roof forms surrounding. And I want to show you the context that this project sits in. The fact that there's one entry which comes in through this kind of courtyard garden, and another entry which is the sort of sister, I'll say, cousin perhaps, house, which is owned by the same client. So their idea was to purchase this property at the rear and make this kind of L-shaped project where they could live in one and rent the other one. And this one is all about sort of multiple living. However, I'll show you this courtyard and the back, which is this slightly strange kind of roof form, and let you know that we've done a lot of calculations about how the water falls, where it's going to fall, and so on, which is all very technical, but it is pretty interesting. And I suppose that some architects get into that kind of thing. So one of the important things about this sharing idea is that this part of the site is the so-called new house, and this part of the site is the original house. And what's really super important is that the kitchen for the new project links strongly to the kitchen from the other project. And through this, we can make a wonderful social experience to integrate these two houses. But what is really interesting is that very early on, we picked up that it's the kitchen that makes the difference in the way that they relate. And so the flat relationship between this level and this level is what was important, and in fact set all the floor levels of the new project. This is the upper level, we won't talk too much about it, but you come up the stairs and there's this larger bedroom with a living room and a kind of core with more bathroom and a sort of little kitchenette. So this could be a separate sort of living space, and there was a sense that this area here could become a lift at a later stage if it was required for accessibility. Here you can start to see how this roof form has been determined, which is partly to do with town planning reasons, but you can also see this very deep water storage tanks and the pump, and this is all related to being somewhat embedded in the ground, and the level of the laneway compared to the level of this, the fall of the land along here. I won't go into this too much, other than to say that the fall of the roof and where the gutters and the downpipes were very carefully thought about. So this is the laneway, and I'll show you some photos soon of how the downpipes in the laneway are really a wonderful opportunity to splash directly onto the laneway surface, which is allowed for a laneway in Melbourne. At the street end, we need to have a downpipe which is connected into the system. And here we have a rather complicated system of a pit and a pump, which is all about expelling water into the street and then overflow into the laneway through this semi-external space. And we've got a complicated scenario, but wonderfully visible, of the bird bath at this downpipe, and then this kind of other exposed downpipe going straight into a rain garden. So this bird bath goes along this exposed surface drain, and you'll see that in a minute, going into this rain garden. So here is the experience of the greenery that comes from when you're exposing water. And here is the exposed downpipe that we just mentioned. It's quite invisible. And here is the drain, which is leading into this rain garden. So a couple of photos of this bird bath. The one on the left is after the garden has grown significantly, and the one on the right is prior to that. And you can see that the bird bath leads directly into this rain garden, and this is the other exposed sort of cantilevered gutter spout there. So what's important, I think, is that this exposed downpipe and the bird bath are very interactive with the internal experience. So we've placed this bench seat along the inside right next to the window. And here you can see that the floor level is actually dug down in relation to the external level of this bird bath. And it means that when you're sitting here, you're really close to experiencing the splashing water when it's raining, and to really sensing anything if there does come to be a bird there. Here is this cantilevering spout, which takes the water from a portion of the roof and lands it into the rain garden. So it was really important for us that this became something that was designed and beautiful and integrated in with the rest of the project. And here is the section of it showing the spout and how it cantilevers and interacts with the structure of this whole section here and lands into the rain garden. And this is a structural detail really, but what I want to say here is that the idea of this gutter detail is fully integrated with the whole idea of both the roof sheeting, but also completely integrated with the idea of the doors and the tracks and how the whole thing is put together and how the upstairs works as well. So now we're shifting to one of the laneway gutters, and I think you can see here that we're cutting short the gutter, and when it's raining and there's significant roof fall here, it's gushing down along here in this approximately 1 meter of exposed rainfall with a little lip at the end, and it's all flowing. So that prior photo was of this area here, and you can see there's this huge and quite gushy, powerful rainfall along that angle, and a relatively small amount of length of the downpipe, and it's all running onto this laneway. This is the semi-external space of the car area, which links quite directly to this raised courtyard. So here's a section which shows the interaction, I think I showed this already once, between the courtyard, that gushy rain roof, the rest of the roof, and how that all interacts with this area and these important tanks, and the dashed line of the level of that kitchen, which interacts over here with that level. So here I just want to show you a few slides to explain again this sense of how digging into the ground can really raise your experience. So when you're sitting at this desk, you're right on level with all the greenery and the ground of what's going on outside. So if there is somebody out there, you can interact in a certain way. And I guess this relates to that levels that I discussed in my own kitchen window that I'm looking out now, and the bridge of the neighbours, you can interact in a different way. So here is that lower room and how you're looking out. You can see that on the left is the raised level of the laneway, and in front of you is the garden. So here's the same garden a little bit later, and you can understand the idea of really experiencing that garden and really interacting with that garden through that level difference. And from the outside, there's quite a degree of privacy given to that person sitting in there due to the level difference, but of course also the garden. And this is prior to the growth of the garden, but you can see that there's quite a lot of levels interaction happening here, which gives that sense of privacy. So here's another slide to give you a feeling of all the different levels that were thought about for this project in terms of the slope of the land on this site and how we could think about all the relationships between different people at different times. Here's another diagram. This time it's about pipes, I suppose, and how the system of water supply in particular works on the site. So you can see that there's a sort of a nexus of wet areas in the middle here. This is the bathroom and the kitchen and the laundry. And we don't need to go into it in great detail, but part of our thinking is about what pipes might be exposed and what might be embedded into walls and so on. But in order to think about this at all, we've gone through a great deal of thinking for all of our projects of exactly how do the pipes run so that they work, which of course we all need to do, but also in the case of if they're exposed, how will they be exposed, and making sure that that can be both technically and regulatorily okay, and also that it will look visually okay. So here is the relationship between the kitchen of the old house and the courtyard, and the smooth relationship to the new kitchen and the laundry. So that's the visual sight lines through. And here is a slide showing you the section in the other direction, which shows you how there's a significant fall in the land, which needed to be dealt with. Obviously, this is different for every project, and this is how we worked on it for this project. Here we're looking through from the laundry back towards the kitchen of the original house. So past the new kitchen and through to the courtyard. This is looking from the new kitchen back towards the laundry, and this is all those pipes that we had the drawing of just before. And now we're looking from the laundry through across the semi-external space and out to the laneway. And this is important, that the way that the car spot has been designed is to allow it to, for example, have a double use as some kind of workshop, which in fact it is often used as. And in this scenario, we can open the back gates right up. And obviously you can also close those gates and moderate the relationship between the laneway. But I guess what's important is the idea that you can have that kind of relationship with the laneway. So here the gates are open again, and you can see this kind of link through to the courtyard. And this is a really important aspect of the idea of being conscious of water, is the way that the water from the ground runs across and through the site. So this is something that it's really important to think through where you're going to stop the water and where you're going to allow it to keep going. This is a bit of a study of a Japanese traditional row house, and perhaps we don't need to go into it in too much detail other than to say there is this sort of sense of the semi-external space with this earthen floored circulation, and this is quite instructive in terms of thinking about the relationship to the garden and how you can step up and down between the dry rooms of the tatami mats. Here's this wonderful semi-external space again. It's essentially a kind of side corridor, but it's a wide space where you can actually do things. And you can step up, of course, onto the tatami mat spaces on the right. And here you can see that it's somewhat similar to the way we've been thinking about our project, that there is this sort of robust flooring and sense of how the water might actually literally move through the site, and then the dry spaces you can walk up to. This is a study of the relationship between the historic type of use on the site and the proposal, which of course is now built. And I think what I want to say here is that there's quite a lot that we can learn from the historic condition of our projects in the case of these sort of projects where there was a building there before. So we're actually taking over the site of two small narrow buildings, and the wet areas, of course, there were closets right at the very back of the site, and importantly, verandas at both the front and the back. So I think that what we're trying to think about here is that verandas and semi-external space can work in with this kind of situation where wet activity is happening outside. And this sort of idea of bringing water activity into the outside, I feel not only is typical for Collingwood in the 19th century or an early 20th century, but has a real place in our culture where we spend a lot of time living outside. So just as a continuation of this idea of the laneway life, that in the 19th century in Melbourne, there was a lot of activity happening in the laneways. So they acted as areas for sort of water to be dispelled, and actually also sewage, but we don't need to talk about that. So there was a lot going on, but also, of course, they're wide enough for both people and animals to walk around. And that's part of what's important about thinking about and raising awareness of how water works in our cities. And so if we can do something like this, where we're opening up the activity and what is happening on the inside of a project towards the lane, we can face the lane, there's a lot of potential for really thinking about the way that we think about water in the house. So now I want to, I'm really just going full bore. I'm really looking forward to some questions. So I'll keep going. There's less slides for the Point Lonsdale house, which is on Wathawarung country. Now, Point Lonsdale house also looks at gutters, pipes and taps, of course. And I think this slide instantly shows you that, again, there's a very strong sensibility of the relationship of the floor with the ground outside. And I'll also point out that one of the important factors of this house is that there's there's no gutter up the top here, but what we do have is this in-ground drainage system. So here we're trying to step with the ground, and you can see here that part of the project, which opens directly to the outside, is pretty much on level with the ground outside, and then part is raised up on the left and part is down on the right, and it's following the slope of the land. So here's a drawing, it's a kind of a diagram that shows you how the contours of the site operate, and that the project, there's multiple reasons for this angling of the project, but it also, amongst everything else, pretty much follows the slope of the land. So the section is following the slope of the land, and we have here the drain. And it's difficult to explain this wonderful precedent very quickly, but this is a National Trust house in, I've just momentarily forgotten the name of the place, but it's just north of Beechworth. It'll come to me. But what's important about this house, besides its amazing sort of abstract plan, 9-part plan, is that the veranda is a raised timber veranda for two halves of the diagonally around the building, and around the back it's an embedded brick into the ground. So what's actually happening is that the brick part, and you can see this fall of the land here, so this is the timber raised veranda part, and here we have the embedded brick part of the veranda, and this part is related to this kitchen outbuilding, which is a fireproof building. So we're really learning from precedents like that. Here is a structural section which shows you how the water is falling into this gutter, and here we're just trying to show you the sense of this gutter, and this is obviously during construction, but the way that this gutter retains, or the roof retains, a kind of line quality. What it means really is that the drainage happens here. When you're inside, you're seeing drips of water when it's raining from every single one of these mini valleys that make up the corrugations. Here's the kitchen, and we're stepping down from this level in the kitchen, and it means that this bench seat can, bench table can have a nice relationship to people outside with this open window, and the kitchen window, the sink window, again has a direct link to greenery, and we can see here some exposed pipes underneath. So here I just want to run through a couple of ideas with you. Sorry, I think I'm slightly repetitive here, but here is that bay window with the windows that slide open so that you can have a bench to link between people out here and people in here. So there's a sense that this kitchen, which is a low kitchen here, and the tall sections such as the fridge and so on are in here. There's a sense of making a relationship that way, and that this window looks across the veranda, and because of that angle that we looked at before, there's actually a bit of open space here and the ability to look over the fence and kind of through, not to directly across to a neighbour, as you would if the window was parallel, but kind of like across the garden. And of course there's opportunity for planting to happen here as well. Something that I wanted to note about the way that the structure has been considered in terms of pipe work. The structure is tilt-up concrete panels, but we've been thinking through where we could allow for timber infill into that panelized system. And the timber infill is where we have wet areas. So on the left here, you can see that this one is the other side of this panel here. And this is where we have all the pipework and also power and all the services coming up and down through these panels. This pair is about, and I'll show you some more slides of this kind of thing later, but it's about the idea that through the way that the circulation works, we can have a sense of the relationship between the different floor levels. So I think I've got some diagrams of this kind of thing. Sorry, I'm flicking a bit quickly. That's the general plan. This is a diagram of the way that the wet areas interact again with the circulation. This is that kitchen that we were looking at before. And this is a door through to the outside, a door into this sort of central sort of ground semi-external space through the whole house. Another one of those doors, and this is the I guess the official entry from under the car park. These are entries into the wet areas of the bathrooms and so on. And these areas are jam-packed with storage and the taller elements of the kitchen. This is a couple of diagrams and photos about the idea that you can really try to think about the position of people and the relationship between people and how the design can relate to that. So in our projects at NMBW, we're very much thinking about standing at the kitchen sink. It's an absolutely important and crucial moment in the design of a house. And here is a second sink, which can be used for the laundry, and this idea that the kitchen can effectively be expanded by having two people working in tandem, but that there would be a sight line between them, and that the pantry and fridge can be part of this more circulatory zone. So these are just more photos of this kind of moment where you've got the pantry and you're stepping up and through. So you're looking through to the front door. And then there are these complex moments where you're interacting. This is that same pantry that we're seeing here. And you're interacting with all sorts of wet areas and storage areas. So that's this kind of relationship that we were just looking at. So you're standing here looking that way to the front door, and you're standing here at this basin and looking that way. So these are the sort of relationships that we're interested in. Here's another wash basin and a glimpse of the bathroom, and you're looking towards these people coming up and down the stairway. And here's the stairway, and looking across and through, that's that pantry from before, and through to the so-called back veranda, which is effectively the side. And here's a diagram of those views where you're looking towards the stair and you're looking from this wet area here towards the stair. And we just wanted to also note that these kind of through relationships are the most important setup moments for how we can think about the way that we're looking at both the way that the pipes work in a sort of efficient way within the house, but also the way that the taps are really interacting across spaces, and that the groundwater is staying conscious, and roof water is staying conscious in our minds. So that's the end result of that project. And we're coming back to this idea of awareness and thinking about those things. And just before finishing up, I think I've got one more slide after this, but I did want to note this one thing, which I'll be interested if anybody has any comments or thoughts on this. But on the left, we have a Bunnings garden tap, which in 2018, I haven't double checked this for current cost, 2018, it cost $9 for a tap, and effectively the same function on the right in 2019 cost $999. So I feel like that's something significant, and I'd love to hear if anyone has any thoughts on that one. And this is really my end point, where I'm just going back to the North Melbourne House, but trying to think about this idea of bringing water into our awareness and consciousness as a way of thinking about water sustainability. And of course, I will note that there were plenty of sort of technology-based ideas about sustainability in this project as well. But this is like where the really crucial moment is that I feel that we can add to the discussion about sustainability of water. So that's going back to the final slide here. It's the discussion, but I might go back to this one. And I will turn my video back on, if it works, and just mute myself, because I think Stephanie will perhaps have some wonderful questions for me.
Thank you so much, Marika, for that beautiful presentation. So much to think about. And again, encourage people to pop questions into the Q&A box. We've got a great opportunity, I guess, to discuss with a little bit of time left. One question I guess I'd put to you, Marika, is that, say if somebody was looking at this and saying and thinking, you know, I'd love to do something perhaps slightly less conventional in terms of gutters and pipes, but felt a bit daunted by the technical aspects, where would you suggest they start, and what could help?
So just to clarify, you mean that somebody wants to start thinking about some of these sorts of things, for example, what's in this slide right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe put forward, you know, some of these ideas, or perhaps a less conventional approach to how the downpipes might work, or how, you know, you showed before, I guess, you know, some of the calculations that are required in terms of working that out. Is that something that you did in-house, or did you have help with that from a specialist?
Oh, we definitely worked very closely with the civil engineer. And, you know, in a house, it's difficult to even have a civil engineer, let alone a hydraulics engineer. So we understand that. And so in a way, it was weirdly advantageous that the site itself was so difficult with this big slope. And also because of, I didn't really explain it properly, I suppose, but because of the town planning kind of reasons for that, what I was calling the very gushy roof, the sort of very steep roof, which was required for overlooking kind of reasons. Because of that, we had to have a sunken floor. And because of the sunken floor, we needed to really have a civil engineer on board. So it does, and I will say that a sunken floor carries a fair bit of risk, you know, because you have to really drain it properly, and there's quite a lot of, well, somebody needs to work all that out.
Mm.
So I think that that it's reasonably difficult in an average residential project to get the kind of help that we had, the technical help from the civil engineer. Having said that, I love civil engineers, and I think that that they need to know that they're loved because they're a little bit too, generally a little bit step backish, and I think that they can step forward and have a lot more to say. But having said that, it's pretty difficult to find a civil engineer. So it might be a matter of step by step, thinking through one thing at a time. I think calculating roof fall is not as hard as you might think. It's actually just mathematical, and I've done it lots of times for lots of projects because I think you feel as an architect like you have to use the gutters that are told to you by the sort of regulatory handbooks. But actually, you can design gutters. You can work out the gutter size, and what you need to do for that is to calculate the roof area and the angle of the roof, and therefore you understand how much rainfall is falling into a gutter, and if it's beyond a certain amount, you do need to calculate that. Now that you do need, probably because it won't be a conventional gutter, you will need to get somebody to confirm it for you. If you can't work it out within, there are guides actually within the BCA, but if you can't work it out based on that, you might need to get an hour or two's worth of guidance on calculating that. But it's quite exciting actually to work out your own gutter, and because the theatre of the rainfall is when there's a gushing rainfall. It's very amazing to be inside a space and be able to see a lot of rain coming down. So it can be quite an event. Obviously, you have to feel like you're dry inside, and you also have to feel like your house generally is dry. And anyway, all the regulations will make sure that is the case. But it's pretty amazing to be able to experience rainfall. Does that?
No, that's fantastic. Because I mean, I think we'd all acknowledge that yes, often on a residential project you don't necessarily have all those specialist consultants. So, but as you said, it might not be engaging them for the whole project. It might just be some assistance with one aspect of it. And then I guess thinking about other types of projects, I guess the challenge often with institutional clients is they're very risk averse and perhaps might have their own guidelines in terms of what you can and can't do. Do you have any advice for persuading large clients that where you probably do have a civil engineer to perhaps try something a little bit different?
Yes, well, that's a good question. And I was going to show a couple of slides, for example, from, well, I think I can just say it, from the University of Melbourne. We've recently completed I think it's now called the Student Precinct on the corner of Grattan and Swanson Streets, just sort of in from there. And NMBW has done a couple of projects there. And I think if you're around, because it's in Carlton, you might see it, but there's a new courtyard for the 1888 building, the back of the 1888 building, which has got, again, this kind of big gutter and rain garden kind of combo, and another fairly expressive gutter in, I think it's, sorry, I keep forgetting the building numbers. I'm pretty sure it's a 168, but anyway, it's a big multi-story brick building with a glass atrium extension on it. So NMBW worked on that extension in the interior on a couple of levels there. And that glazed atrium has also got big gutters and sort of very experienceable chain downpipes and all this kind of thing. It's extremely difficult to convince institutional clients and clients generally when they are taking responsibility for others, and that's why these people are, well, these institutions are risk averse, is because, they're worried about, for example, chain downpipes splashing at the bottom and people slipping over, that kind of thing, which is, it is completely understandable. So I guess that it's difficult when you're first doing these projects, because it's literally trying to understand what the issues are, and I've just mentioned a couple, but it's difficult to understand the implications of each little thing that you propose. But I guess, again, this idea of going step by step, and these houses, for example, that we've just shown to you, firstly, that they're houses, so they're private clients, so you're only convincing them, and secondly, they're relatively small, and so as a building, and so the amount of guttery activity that you can have is somewhat limited. So the room for experimentation can be somewhat contained, and you can try and concentrate and think about just a few things at a time. Then through that, you can gain experience and be able to predict the kind of issues that might come about in a public project. But having said that, you probably won't be able to predict all of them. And I think it's difficult because every single situation is going to be different. So I think my main advice, going back to your question, is to just be really determined. And you can only be determined about a few things at a time. So you have to really decide what you're going to be determined about. So what is the most effect that I can get? And if you're really keen to try and let people experience water, then for this project, where is the best place that I can do that? And just really go for it in that place. You just might not be able to do it everywhere, but you can try and, for example, do a sort of a milder version of things, and you can have a little set of ideas of different ways that you can approach a given situation. But I guess, one of the things is just simply, just looking at these slides that are up at the moment, there's the bird bath idea. It's pretty basic. You can think about that and think about where that could happen. As a spout, a cantilevered spout, that could, they're just ideas that could happen anywhere. So it's just about trying to think about where those ideas are most possible. This project, this house, was very difficult because of the slope of the land and the kind of issues that were raised anyway. So, that's, in a weird way, that's why there was so much opportunity to express the rainfall in this project. By the way, the client, one of the clients, in fact, is a civil engineer.
That must have helped.
He didn't do the work for us, but he's very keen on understanding everything. That was kind of nice.
Fantastic. A bit beautifully answered. And look, I think we're almost out of time, but in closing, I think too, even just this slide demonstrates just the power of precedent. Do you know what I mean? In terms of, there's nothing quite like being able to point to a realised example of something slightly different and say, look, the world hasn't ended there. Perhaps it will be okay. And again, so helpful to have a presentation like this. And thank you for sharing those beautiful projects and images as well. And thank you everybody for joining as well. Just a reminder that these lean-ins are recorded to view later, and you'll receive notifications of when new lean-ins are available to view by subscribing to the Australian Institute of Architects YouTube channel, YouTube at Oz Architects. And once again, just thank you so much, Marika. That was fantastic.
Thank you. And I'll just note that if there are any other questions, I'd love to see them, Stephanie. I'm sorry, I just talk on and on. So
no, it was perfect.
There wasn't enough time to talk too much, but I'm really keen to understand and know what people had to say or had any thoughts. Thank you, everybody, and thanks
again.